Thank you for watching another episode of the Boat Geeks. If you are liking what you're finding here at our channel, please hit the thumbs up below.
And please like and subscribe so you don't miss a future episode.
Absolutely. And you can comment too. Feel free to comment.
Yeah, we love to hear what you think.
Thank you.
And before he could take that trip to Alaska, what do you think happened? He died.
Not a good
He
thing.
died.
I didn't want to suggest that.
Yeah, I don't want to suggest that to you either because you keep working.
But I had a
yours.
feeling,
Yeah. And I tell people that.
Yeah.
And I'm also quite proud that I go to Alaska every year with a 30-foot boat.
Mm-hmm.
And people say, don't you need a bigger boat to do it? No. There are people that do it. Carl Kruger, who you should have as a guest on your show, he did it 2 years ago on the Race to Alaska on a stand-up paddleboard.
We've
That's
talked
what we were
about
gonna
him.
say.
Yeah.
Carl's the Iron Man of boating.
From beautiful Port Townsend, Washington, a Victorian seaport on the Salish Sea, and recorded aboard the motor vessel Traveler. It's the Boat Geeks with Darren and Daeron.
Welcome to the next episode of the Boat Geeks. I am your host, Darren.
And I'm your other host, Darren.
When my wife and I bought our first boat a few years ago, we started to dream and plan about what we were going to do with that boat, where we were going to go with that boat, what we were going to see with that boat.
The whole reason for owning a boat.
The whole reason for owning that boat.
Going places.
And that was thanks to our next guest, a very fun process. And what I'm talking about is getting the Waggoner guide and sitting down, which is something I'm sure most of you have done at some point. Sitting down at your dinner table or your table or whatever, your desk, and starting to flip the pages, picking out destinations, picking out locations, dreaming up your course and what route you're going to take. And I have had, unfortunately for me, hopefully you've all had better success than I have, because most of my trips were in my head with my wife at the dinner table, planning what we were going to do with our boat. The reality is our boat has undergone a lot of work over the last few years.
You guys will get out there someday.
So my trips were in my head, but it couldn't have been better than sitting down with the Waggoner guide. And what a great time to talk about it. It's the 30th anniversary this year. Our guest today is Mark Bunzel, the publisher, the owner, the operator, the everything, one of the everythings over at the Waggoner guide.
I have help.
Yeah, I know you have help. That
people.
is why I corrected myself.
Yeah.
I know you have help, and they are very important. But Mark, welcome to the Boat Geeks.
Thank you. You guys picked a perfect day out here.
I know, right?
We should be out boating.
It had, our last many podcasts have been kind of overcast. We're getting into the boating season, which is great. What a great time to break out the Waggoner guide. Yeah. And we did put an order in for sunshine today and we got it. So
that's great.
There you go.
That's great. I appreciate your comments about using this as the dream book. I mean, there are occasionally times that I've gone and said, hey, we are the Sears catalog. For those of you watching who know what a Sears catalog was, the Sears catalog of adult boaters.
Yeah, that is such an appropriate and perfect description because
the Christmas book. I'm sorry, the Christmas
the Christmas catalog. When I was a kid,
with all the toys.
Yeah, like what was better than getting the Sears catalog in the mail with the whole toy section and maybe some other sections too.
Did Sears put out a catalog that wasn't
about
right? Christmas and toys? That's all I thought it was.
That was the only one I paid attention to, the one that came before December. But anyway, it's totally true. The same way I sat there and dreamt up what I was going to play with in the Sears catalog as a child or a young person, that's what I did as an adult with the Waggoner guide. I mean, it was literally my wife and I just had such a great time saying, we can go over here and look what they have here at this, and you have all the maps of the marinas, and we could talk about, just basically you can, live this trip in your mind through the guide. You have so many pictures and descriptions, and it's just perfect.
Well, we
for planning a trip.
We cross the gender divide, and I see this at the boat show, that we have typically the female side, often the navigator for the boat, coming up to our booths and saying, oh, I have to have the new edition. I have to start picking out the places we're going to go. And that's thrilling. That's so much fun. And then, often we'll talk about, oh, have you been to this place or have you been to that place? And that's part of the fun part of my job.
Absolutely.
It's fun to do that with the Waggoner Guide, but I think it's also important because if you can, it's best to visualize your trip in detail because you have to know, you have to have contingency plans. If we're not going to make our destination, I already know 3 places that we're going to go by reading the book and what is a good anchorage and what is a questionable one given the conditions.
Yeah.
So it's really beneficial to not just dream, but to plan.
Oh, I appreciate your comments. I really do. It's like I said, it's part of the joy in my job.
Yeah.
And I do get so many great comments from people at the boat shows or when I give yacht club presentations or different groups, and they're so appreciative. And how many people can say that in their job every day that customers?
Absolutely. Like I said, we've been working on our boat for 3 years. So our trips have been.
You need to fix that problem.
I do need to fix that problem.
You need to get off the dock.
Yeah.
I'm in the process. But so we've done little trips up to Port Townsend to get work done or whatever. But literally, I have enjoyed my time on the water through the Waggoner Guide.
Yeah.
My wife and I would sit down for 2 hours and talk about, just flip through and look at all the pictures and talk about where we're going. It is such a great resource. It's not just a tool. It is a necessity. In fact, I don't know how I would go cruising up here without it. I need to visualize.
Everybody has to have one.
I need to visualize. I need to have all that information right in front of me so that you can make the choices. And so, just a wonderful resource for everybody up here in the Pacific Northwest. 30th anniversary. I mean, that is now, you've been with the Waggoner Guide for how long?
Good question. 12 years.
Yeah. So that is an amazing tenure.
And I should bring up the founder of this was Robert Hale.
Yep.
And he set the pattern. And when you go back, and we have them in the office, the 1994 edition.
Oh, yeah.
And start to look at, and Bob will tell you, he said, when I finished it, I just didn't think it was that good. Yeah. But it was great. And he continued to develop after that. And so the challenge to me when I bought it and took it over, and Bob has had a couple of great quotes about the handoff to me. And but I'll never forget the first boat show. Here I am standing at our booth, and this little old lady, I hate to characterize that. I hope I didn't offend anybody out there by saying that. She comes up to me and she's shaking her finger at me and she goes, "Don't you screw it up."
No pressure.
No pressure.
Did you ever have any follow-up? Did she come up the next year and say thank you?
No,
Of course not.
No.
Yeah. Well, so I feel like there's obviously a ton of stuff we can dive into regarding the guide, and we will.
But first,
we are the Boat Geeks.
There you are.
And we like to discuss with every one of our guests what makes you a boat geek, or what makes you interested in boats, or how you were introduced to the boating lifestyle. So please.
Wow. Where did it all begin?
Yeah.
Where did it all begin? I was a young lad in Hartford, Wisconsin.
Oh.
Yeah.
And my grandfather used to take me out and we'd go fishing on a Thompson wooden boat with a 20 horsepower Chrysler outboard, which happened to be made in Hartford.
Wow.
So that was kind of interesting. And so, as you get older as a young guy, Grandpa, can I run the boat? And eventually he let me. Yeah. And then eventually he gave me the boat, which was kind of thrilling. I wish I still had it. I mean, I just have memories of that, and I can still smell the wood and the varnish and all of that. And anyway, so that's how it started. Freshwater on a lake. And then after that, my dad was transferred to the East Coast outside of Philadelphia, and I started boating in Ocean City, New Jersey. I went to work at a place, if there's anybody watching, would remember in Ocean City, a place called Pleasure Marine, which was great because a couple of us had an apartment over the marina, naturally called the Pleasure House.
Of course.
And you'd walk up the front step up to the second floor, and there was a bathtub there, a wrought iron, with legs and everything. So for parties, the bathtub would get filled with ice. So as you walked in, I mean, you could just imagine
party
this.
tub.
Now, I was 15 years old, so, but...
started partying early.
Yeah. So to date it, and here's the other date for those of you watching. How many of you remember Bally High It was a fruit wine that if you drank too much, you'd definitely puke.
Right.
But it was the hot thing for that summer.
Yeah.
So anyway, but I started repairing Mercury outboards and stern drives and sailing whenever I could, and bought my first boat in Ocean City, New Jersey. So at the age of 15, I was working in a marina.
It was already in your blood.
It was
as a
in
young
my
man.
blood.
Wow.
And I have another passion in addition to that, is that I'm a private pilot. I have over 2,000 hours of flight time, and I'm commercial rated, twin engine and commercial rated.
Wow.
And I went back and forth, and I actually faced a dilemma when I got out of the working world. I was working in New York City, producing large industrial shows and video. And I was starting to go down the path of buying a sailboat. But mooring a sailboat around New York City is a real challenge. And I was trying to pick places and this and that. And an opportunity came up to buy half of an airplane. So I bought half of an airplane, but then started chartering and chartering down in the Virgin Islands and different places in the Caribbean for years. So yeah, it's been part of my blood every year. And then I eventually discovered the Northwest.
Yeah.
And here I am.
I find that pilots and
There's so
boaters are so simpatico. They're so similar.
Absolutely.
They love their vessel or their plane.
And
they,
we're spending a ton of money.
ton of money. They're both
Ton of money,
holes in the ground or whatever, holes in the water to
Great
throw money
investments.
Yeah.
Planes and boats.
Yeah.
Really good investments.
It's the same thing, picking out a destination and dreaming about it, planning your trip, dealing with the weather and the winds and the challenges when you get to that brand new airport to you of landing the plane safely.
I'm assuming there's an appeal of adventure to you with both boating and flying. Like it's just
absolutely.
the unknown and as I often, quote, second start of the right and on till morning, I just love the idea of just going in a direction and what comes.
Well, and one of my dreams, I was living on the East Coast at the time, and you read the magazines like we all do and start dreaming. And I always wanted to fly to the Bahamas.
Oh, wow.
So it took years.
Why?
Why the Bahamas?
Yeah, why
God,
specifically?
you look at those pictures
Blue,
of that blue water,
Yeah.
and
My
how
God,
gorgeous
yeah.
it looks. And you go, I want to go there. I want to be there.
Yeah.
And by the way, that's part of the criteria in the Waggoner Guide that our managing editors, Leonard and Lorena Landon, and myself, we want to capture that. I want to be there.
Yeah.
Nice.
And so I had that with the Bahamas. And I finally, after about flying for about 20 years, had an opportunity with a work schedule where I had kind of a sabbatical and was able to fly from San Jose, California, across the entire country to the Bahamas.
Wow.
And then what did I do when I got to the Bahamas? I chartered a
Went
sailboat.
boating. Yeah, that's the right way to do
The
it.
best of both worlds.
The
Yeah.
best of both
Yeah.
worlds. It
Yeah.
was just incredible.
Yeah.
And sailed for 10 days and then reluctantly gave him the sailboat back and jumped in the airplane and flew up to Annapolis and then across the country. It
What kind
was
of plane?
amazing. I had a Mooney 231, which is a turbocharged four-seater, very fast, very fuel efficient, and that's the airplane I used for that trip. And I owned that airplane for about 13, 14 years.
So how many hops across, how often were you having to land a smaller plane like that to get across the country?
On the way over, it was interesting. One of my first hops was to New Orleans, and I didn't know it at the time, but Mardi Gras was going on.
Oh, yeah?
And I was spending the night, and when you pull into the equivalent of a marina, it's called an FBO, and you can ask them, can you guys get me a hotel reservation? And so they got me a great hotel reservation right down in the French Quarter. And so, I got to experience firsthand the Mardi Gras.
Yeah.
And then continued to go from there. I had a board meeting in Melbourne, Florida. So went New Orleans to Melbourne and then picked up in Fort Pierce. You rent your overwater gear and you have to rent a life vest and so forth.
Yeah.
And I picked that up and then off I jumped to Marsh Harbor.
Wow.
So when you flew,
fascinating trip.
you flew back to the West Coast, you said eventually.
Yes.
So at what point did you go from the New Jersey, New York area to the West Coast?
Well, I had one of my son was having a birthday in between, so I flew up to Annapolis, and I was going to have a bunch of meetings around Annapolis, and I parked the plane at Baltimore Airport, and then jumped on the airlines and flew back to California commercially. And then when I flew back out, I grabbed my skis, and Buddy was going to join me, and then flew, when I left Annapolis to fly back to California, I stopped for a week of skiing in Colorado. And that to me was finally being able to use this, the dream trip.
Yeah, I'm sure.
And that was fascinating.
It's like, hey, let's go to New York for dinner tonight, and you know, you're in another part of the country.
Well,
when you say
I used to do that in the beginning of my career. I had a Cessna 172 four-seater, and a bunch of us would pile into the plane on the weekend and go to Boston for dinner, or down to Washington,
Nice.
D.C.
That's so cool.
And it was cool. It was incredibly cool. And we get to do that with boats also.
Yeah.
We get to go to these incredible places.
Yeah.
The restaurants are usually good, or an adventure. Some adventures better than others.
Of course. But you got to have the ones that aren't so good to make the other ones look and feel better.
That's right.
Yeah, I feel, again, like there's just a total connection between boaters and pilots. It's that sense of adventure. It's that sense of the unknown. It's also seeing the world from a different perspective, right? Like, so from a plane, you're seeing it from above. From a boat, you're seeing it from out in the water, which you never get that perspective as a non-boater.
Right.
And so I love just that feeling of seeing things that, you know, maybe not everybody gets to see, going places and seeing things that are special. And it's, you know, up here in the Pacific Northwest, we have a lot of those places. How many destinations do we have in the Pacific Northwest? I always say over 1,000. But I
just look at the index of the Wagner
know.
Guide.
Well, it is over 1,000, and the Wagner Guide, for those of you not aware, is 528 pages. And I've counted the number of marinas, and I can't remember, but it was around between 1,000 and 1,100. And trying to choose which ones to go to is always amazing. And sometimes I've gone out and put a theme to it. So about 8 years ago, I decided to visit as many of the hot springs in northern BC that I could go to.
Nice.
And some of them are pretty remote and really pretty fascinating to get in there, where a local community has built that hot springs. And there's one, Yucat, that is a rock grotto.
Wow.
And it's just fantastic. And then another one was a small hut, and I was there with a friend, and we were dressed. I should add that. And I hear a voice from outside this hut going, "I'm not a bear, but I'm coming in. Don't." He was afraid that we'd scream or something or shoot him. I don't know. And he came out of the bush.
Yeah.
He had been hiking across the island, and there he was. But in that little hut thing, it was surrounded with candles. Now, they weren't lit. It was daytime when I was there. But there was a couple there that were there enjoying. And I suspect they were putting bathing suits back on when I first started walking up.
Yeah.
And I got there, and I could tell they kind of wanted me to leave. And I wanted to get some good pictures. And it's in one of the Wagner Guides a couple of years ago. And just the cutest couple. And, you know, it was like, okay, get your pictures and get the hell out of here. And you could just tell they had brought their boat over from Kitimat, kind of an outboard type boat, open, and they had set up a tent on the beach in a flat spot. And I thought, oh my God, they're going to have the most romantic night with the candles and the hot springs and everything.
Yeah.
And I don't dare tell them life's not going to be that good going forward. This will be, it's all downhill from there.
This is the peak.
Enjoy every moment.
Yeah. Now they probably have 8 kids and bills to pay and a mortgage.
What a special time, though.
Yeah. But those are the experiences you can have.
It is a paradise up here.
Yeah. And you once told me you put every season, how many miles? You were doing like 4,000 miles.
Well, I try to visit about 250 marinas every summer.
Crazy.
and stopping as we go. And some of them I visit every year. Many I hit every couple of years. Leonard and Lorena do the same thing, and that's how we hit all these marinas to,
Well,
to be
this
able
is
to
from
report on it.
Olympia
all the way to
to
Glacier Bay, Alaska. You bet.
I mean, how many miles is that alone?
Well,
right?
that alone is to Glacier Bay is over 1,000 miles, and
you were doing multiple trips.
yeah, well, yeah, I don't go to the same places twice,
Yeah,
obviously, but I normally start my summer taking a group up with me, usually 10 or 11 boats in a flotilla, and we'll leave this year on May 28th.
Wow.
And spend a little over 4 weeks going to Petersburg, Alaska. And I try to arrange special dinners and special events along the way and speakers. And I am always on the lookout for bears on the beach and all kinds of things to point out to people, and just special experiences. But the thing that surprised me, and hopefully we'll get into this in the discussion today, but the thing that surprised me with the flotillas is the camaraderie that you develop with the other boaters at the stops and so forth. And you get to know these people well. Darren, I got to know you and Lisa and your wonderful daughter with a trip that we did.
2015.
Is that when it was?
It was 2015.
I remember it like yesterday.
Yeah, we do too.
And it was a fantastic trip. And we were talking a little earlier before we started recording this about some of the people that were on that trip that were memorable.
Yeah.
And so the people are just fantastic. And even if you're not in a flotilla, places like Echo Bay, where Pierre Landry used to have the pig roast, no longer does. The local tribe has taken it over.
Pronounce it for me, please. What is Echo Bay now called? It's a.
Oh, I can't speak Indian.
Is it Kwak-Wakiwak
something
Nation
like
up
that,
there?
yeah.
But it's KXA.
We'll put the spelling right here.
Yeah, it's.
Yeah,
I don't know how to pronounce it. I'd love to. If anybody's out there, please let us know how to
Simplify
pronounce
it
it.
for us.
I've gotten into trouble doing that. And I've been corrected by tribal members who say
it's hard.
And at Alert Bay, along the boardwalk, they have these little areas with kind of a special totem for a particular splinter group of a tribe. And I called them the wrong thing. And the next summer I came up and here's a woman, local tribal woman, shaking her finger at me going, no, you can't call them those. They're a Akawak. Oh, okay.
Well, now we learn.
But part of the culture up there also is something that's just fascinating.
Yeah.
There's such an interesting tribal cultures, and I've gotten to know some of the people, especially at Alert Bay, where they have just that fantastic Umista museum.
That's so cool.
That I had an experience there where they don't allow any photography in the museum. So I asked very nicely. I said, I'm doing it for the book and this and that. And I said, can I do some photography? And she said, can you come in on Saturday morning? I said, I'll be there.
Nice.
And they opened up early for me and let me go anywhere in the museum shooting pictures of this.
That's wonderful.
Incredible carvings. And the history and story of how they got these tribal masks. And how they had been confiscated by the government and then returned was just fascinating and made it all that much more special.
Yeah, my wife and I, my family took a cruise up to Alaska in 2018, I think it was. And I've never seen anything so beautiful, so sparsely inhabited, which is what really I think was the beauty for me. You know, besides islands and trees and water and, you know, everything else that's beautiful about it. But the Pacific Northwest, is just a gold mine of destinations and trips and places to go and things to see. Now, you were, putting on these thousands of miles every summer. I had all kinds of questions from that, but one that I really want to get.
There's a few I won't answer.
Yeah, I'm sure there are. I'll still try.
All right.
But I'm very curious about your boat. What boat what was your first purchase in terms of a serious boat? after you decided, I don't know, maybe you owned both your plane and your boat at the same time. What was your first boat?
No, I don't believe in that.
Okay.
That's bad juju.
That's very smart.
Like a 2-boat owner.
Yeah.
Saying
It's like somebody that owns 3 wood boats, right? We don't know anybody that's crazy
God,
like that.
That's awful.
So what was your first big boat purchase?
I bought a sailboat when I first moved up here, a Hunter 34, 1/3 share. And I enjoy sailing when the wind is right.
Yeah.
And I'll never forget going out one day in Rosario Strait, and it was a sunny day like it is today, and a light breeze, a little more than the light breeze blowing, and I had the sail up, and we're just cruising along on a reach, and then one of my kids, I was so proud, we were looking good, and one of my kids goes, "Dad, I think we're going backwards." And sure enough, we were against the current in Rosario Strait. And I was still a newbie, and here we were going backwards.
But you were looking good doing it.
We
weren't you?
were
The
looking
sails
really
were
good.
Full, you
and
were
I was
trimmed.
feeling good. Well, not so feeling good after my kids called me out on it. But I learned after a couple of seasons with the Hunter that I couldn't really get to the places I wanted to get to.
Sure.
As much as I enjoyed sailing. So I am a sailor as well as a power boater. And so I had an opportunity to buy a little mini trawler, a Albin 27 family cruiser that has the cabin in the back and the V-berth up front, so the kids could all be in the back, lock the door, leave them in there, and let them fight it out.
Yeah.
And but it was a very economical boat to run, 9 knots, and we did our early cruising with that.
Nice.
And had some experiences with it. Taking green water over the bow was an interesting experience with that. But my next boat, I had an opportunity. I was busy putting the Waggoner Guide together one year, and it was October, and we were coming right on the press deadline. And a good friend of mine called, and he said, "Hey, friend of mine is selling his Tolly 30." He said, "And this guy's poured money and sweat, blood, and tears into this boat. You really should look at it." And I said, I'm swamped. I can't do it for a couple of weeks. He said, "No, listen to me. You need to come down and take a look at this boat." And I did. And he was right.
Yeah.
It was set up just right. It had been, not to brag about, everybody brags about their boats, like their kids.
Go right ahead.
Okay.
We love bragging about boats.
So it 1978 Tolly, and they're ageless in a way, but this had the gas engines removed and Hino engines, which are popular in the Bayliners, put in. And these were the last couple of engines that Bayliner had still in the factory when they stopped making the Bayliner 32. So 2 of them ended up in the boat that I had. And then the owner didn't stop there. He replaced all the glass with diamond sea glazed glass, which is primo. New galley, 2 furnaces, not 1, 2 furnaces, 1 hydronic, one forced air. And so it had really had a lot of tender loving care. And I still see the owner of that boat, and we're friends.
Yeah.
He gets a Waggoner Guide for life. It's a joke with us.
Yeah, I bet.
Jonathan, you know who you are.
Yeah.
And we have great fun about that. And he happened to be somebody who liked to go after work during the day and tinker with his boat. And he was good at it.
Yeah.
So now, first thing, back to the guy who had re-engined it, put in the glass. He always wanted to take that boat to Alaska.
Oh, yeah.
And he kept working on it. And before he could take that trip to Alaska, what do you think happened? He died.
Not a good
He
thing.
died.
I didn't want to suggest that.
I don't want to
The
suggest
worst.
that to you either, because you keep working.
But I had a
yours.
feeling, yeah.
Yeah. And I tell people that.
Yeah.
And I'm also quite proud that I go to Alaska every year with a 30-foot boat. And people say, "Don't you need a bigger boat to do it?" No. There are people that do it. Carl Kruger, who you should have as a guest on your show, he did it 2 years ago on the Race to Alaska on a stand-up paddleboard.
We've
That's
talked
what we were
about
gonna
him.
say.
Yeah.
Carl Carl's the Iron Man of boating. And so don't wait. I have stories also about people doing it with a 22-foot Sea Dory. And
Sam
Landsman,
yeah.
who used to be managing editor of the Waggoner
Yeah.
Guide. And there are others who do it. I could tell a story about a couple who did it, and that was the last trip they ever did together.
Yeah.
A little too close. And for those of you who know the 22-foot sea dory, the head is right in the V of the V berth.
Yeah.
So you're sleeping
with
the head right below you. And that
not necessarily pleasant.
Not the most pleasant. No. So, but I talk to people who say to me, I really want to make this trip to Alaska when I get my big boat. Don't wait.
Don't wait.
Yeah. No, I agree with any form of boating.
Yeah.
I feel like you can plan and you can wait and you can, do all this forever, years. Time goes by quick. You can be even, browsing the Waggoner Guide and making your plans, but you really just have to get out there and do it. And I say that from owning a boat and not getting out for 3 years. You too many stories of people who wait and then can't do it.
And there are a lot of people who do dream about that trip to Alaska.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And for good reason are nervous.
Yeah.
Yes.
And
yes.
they don't take that step because they're not confident enough. So that's where I would say, look into the Waggoner flotillas.
Yeah.
Well, the flotilla,
those
the
are
training
great.
courses we do.
Yeah.
We have true experts at the Seattle Boat Show with Seattle Boat Show University who come in and talk about weather or maintenance. Nigel Calder is probably the top and just a fantastic individual. And when he teaches people, they sit there for a day-long seminar, spellbound.
You got to listen.
And you can get that education so you feel more comfortable. But get out there, and you're going to make mistakes. You're going to get in weather that'll just scare the bejesus out of you. And we've all done it. And then we say, we're not going to do that again.
Yeah.
But I do a lot of teaching and teach on the weather to try to teach you what to look for and what to avoid.
Right.
But there aren't too many of our recreational boaters who die out there.
We're not talking about open ocean.
Almost none. But
But you still have to be safe, and there are certainly dangers. I know that 2 trips that I want to take in my lifetime, one is the Great Loop, and one is to Alaska and back in my own boat. And I am super nervous about Alaska, logs floating in the water, having to travel by night, potentially anything, but I'm going to do it as soon as I can. This boat's not going to probably do it, but
speaking of traveling by night, did you not once go from Seattle to Alaska in about 70 hours?
Straight?
That'd be about right. So one of the first times I went up with Mike Beamer and Lynette Brower. Mike teaches our maintenance programs at the Marine Tech Center in Anacortes. Fantastic. Somebody you ought to have on your show. And they're both teachers, so they were busy until late June. And they said, well, we want to get as much time as we can up in Alaska. Can you help us out?
Yeah.
I said, yeah, I'll go along with you. I'll be navigator.
Nice.
So I set up this beautiful itinerary, multiple days and stopping in places.
Yeah.
And I had it all set up, and we got to the boat on a Saturday night. Lynette was flying in from out of town. Everybody else, we met at the boat because we were going to leave at 4:30 in the morning, first light, and get underway. And we all got to the boat by 11 o'clock at night. And the water was just flat, calm, not a cloud in the sky.
Inviting you.
And I said, okay, let's see. We're fueled up. We have everybody on board. Let's go.
Yeah.
And what boat was this?
This was Mike Beamer's boat.
Okay.
His now Pilot House sailboat. And we took off, and I'll go to the punchline. 3 hours and 3 days, 21 hours, and we were pulling into Ketchikan. Now,
isn't that amazing?
We did certain things that we planned for. We left at 11 o'clock at night, which meant we couldn't go the usual stops into Canada to clear customs.
Yeah. Right.
So we cruised through the night to Nanaimo. And it happened to be about 9 o'clock, 9:15 when we got to Nanaimo. We cleared customs. Now, we didn't need to, but we didn't know that we were going to be able to go nonstop.
Yeah.
And then we got to just about the very end across Dixon Entrance, and we watched the weather and said, uh-oh. And sure enough, we had 8 to 10 footers for that last stretch, but then it went to 12 to 14 or footers or more in the days after that. So if we had not stretched through that last stretch of pretty challenging water, we would have been stuck in Prince Rupert for up to a week.
So you're looking at scary or more scary
scarier,
or
yeah.
just sitting around for a very long time.
Yeah.
So you
and I
took
teach
off.
this, sitting around, bring some books.
Yeah.
But some days it's better to make that decision.
You got a little window
to stay behind.
Yeah.
And sit there and read a book
Sure.
for the day.
Yeah. That's where people make mistakes, right? Trying to rush, you know.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Cruise on a schedule. Not a good
We
idea
call it
sometimes.
gotta go itis.
Yeah.
And
I've never. That's a good one.
but
Yeah.
I also, along with that, going the other direction, was I used to, if it was a questionable day in the morning, I'd say, that's it. We're not going. Open up the book and be prepared to sit there all day.
Mm-hmm.
And now I've realized that sometimes those winds will drop down during the late afternoon, and you can have a great cruise in that early evening. And luckily we have another Northwest advantage. We have these long days in the summertime.
Yeah.
But when we did that 3 days, 21 hours, our dark was barely dark at 2 a.m.
Yeah.
It was still pretty
That
light
time
out.
of year, yeah.
And we also had some strategies to avoid logs when we got up further up north.
Mhm.
Here was a tugboat pulling 2 huge construction barges with gear on it and everything. And we just tucked in
Follow
behind
There
the
you
their
go.
barges.
Yeah.
Let the
wake.
tug get those.
It's like getting behind the semi on the freeway.
Right.
Yeah,
right. We're
exactly.
drafting.
Now, we did not hit any logs
Mhm.
going up, even though we were cruising through the night.
Yeah.
Now, coming home, Mike and his wife, daylight only, hit 3 logs.
Oh, geez.
Yeah, it didn't cause any damage.
Right.
And that's the other thing I've learned. Not that many people, a log is probably not going to sink you.
Yeah.
Yeah, and often when I've hit logs, it's been a glancing blow.
Right.
Yeah.
The challenge is that log could get hung up in your prop
Yep.
and bend
Do
your
rudder
shaft,
damage.
your
Yeah.
rudder damage
Yeah.
or something. And that's what I worry the most about.
Sure.
And, I've taken my chances. I've gone with large yachts offshore,
Mhm.
headed down towards San Francisco, and also have hit some logs, and it's scary.
Yeah.
But I've also know that sometimes those logs are going to be there even in the daytime, and
Yeah.
you're not going to see them.
Yeah, they're not nighttime logs. It's just a matter of and yeah, a lot of the logs that I've noticed when I've been out are so waterlogged that they're just right on the surface,
Yes.
right below the surface.
Yes.
So even during the day, you're not going to see them.
Yeah. And the other little tip I have with this is that I always encourage people to look at what's the phase of the moon.
Mm.
Full moon or new moon, you're going to have the highest possible tide,
Mm-hmm.
also the biggest currents.
Mhm.
All right. But that high tide will take all those beautiful logs on the beach and wash them off and wash them into the water.
Right.
As the tide goes out, the water goes down and those logs get stuck on the beach again.
Yeah.
But that means on those days of the month, full moon or a new moon is where you have to be the most alert
Yeah.
for logs floating in the water.
See, and there's a lot of local knowledge. We were talking about community earlier, the boating community, and what it's like when you go on a flotilla. I feel like the Waggoner Guide is many years of experience that is added to that. You know, people that have boated up here. Once you start going on trips and you meet people, I mean, I have never met, well, I love the boating community. I was gonna say I've never met better people, but I've met a lot of great people in my life. But the boating community in general, especially up here in Port Townsend, where I've gotten to know more boaters than ever in my life, I love boaters. And they're such happy, positive people for the most part.
Yeah.
'Cause
Hopefully we live longer. I would
hopefully,
like
right?
to believe that, right?
We live happier.
we live
We do.
happier.
We
I
do.
feel like in a lot of ways less stress. For me, the less stress comes. I mean, obviously boats cause stress, but it's from being down here at the marina. It's from being on your boat. It's from the salty air. It's from getting out there and the feeling the wind in your face, and it's the smells. And it's for me, I am never happier or more relaxed than when I'm near the water and near
There's
boats.
so often during the summer when I'm out, and often I'm single-handing.
Yeah.
Often my wife will join me, but many times I'm single-handed. And, you just pinch yourself.
Yeah.
Holy crap, I'm
I know.
getting paid for this.
Yeah.
And to all of you watching, thank you very much for
Thank you,
allowing
thank you.
this
We're
opportunity
happy
to
to
go out.
help.
Yeah.
And I remember one morning I was coming down, and all of a sudden I had a dolphin show.
Mm.
and these dolphins were dancing on the water and jumping, and they were just off the back of my boat.
Yeah.
And it just kept going on and on. And I finally said, hey, guys, I got to go. I got to get to work.
Yeah.
Thank you for the show.
Yeah.
So
wildlife is a huge aspect of my
Absolutely.
love for
Yeah.
the Pacific Northwest.
Yeah.
I will stop at any moment, whatever I'm doing. If I see a whale or a seal or anything out there, we live in a paradise. And if you're a boater, if you're thinking about boating, obviously this Waggoner guide is going to play a very big part in your life and make it more fun and make it easier. And
I would encourage you to read the first 90 pages. We call it How to Boat in the Northwest.
Yep.
But what we've done, Leonard, Lorena, and myself, and our correspondents who write, is we've tried to capture all these things and local knowledge that we've learned from cruising up here.
Yeah.
So many practical tips. And I find not everybody reads it. They go right to the sections for the destination that they're most interested in.
I read everything. Well, at least I know the first Waggoner guide I read from pretty much cover to cover. There maybe were some destinations that I skipped over or whatever, but I feel like you're comparing it to the Sears Roebuck catalog was so on point and so accurate because just now when I just opened it and started flipping through, I can feel it.
We almost lost him right
yeah,
there.
you did. And so
come back, Darren.
it's, and every year there's updates and new stuff that's added, new content. So it's definitely worth buying one regularly.
Yeah, and this is the 30th anniversary edition.
Yes.
And so there are some elements to this particular edition that
Yeah,
are special.
credit to Lorena Landon. She filled in a lot of these little sidebar articles, we call them, throughout the book on some of the history in the area, talking about the history of Tolly and Tollycraft and some of the other things like that, that are kind of intriguing things that we only have in the Northwest.
Yeah.
I boated on the East Coast, and they don't have as much as we have for all of this. Yeah. And when I've done the Intercoastal Waterway, I contrasted that the Intercoastal Waterway is fantastic. I hope you all get a chance to do it.
Someday.
But it's urban location to urban location. They don't have that combination of wildlife that we have that just makes it. They do have history.
Yeah.
And some phenomenal history.
Sure.
But we have some history also, and tribal culture is just absolutely fascinating also.
We have lots of history up here, and also
It goes back 13,000 years.
yeah, it does.
So that's
And
deep, man.
what I love, those moments when we're out and it's calm, beautiful, blue sky, and you can look in any direction and see mountains,
Yes.
huge mountains,
Yes.
and trees in every direction. And it is.
When people say what makes it so special in the Northwest, I say rocks and trees. Rocks and trees. It's just the way those rocks and trees are arranged.
How they were set up. Somebody,
Thank you, Lord.
Yes, no doubt about it.
Throw in some whales and it's perfect.
Somebody was a designer.
And even on a rainy day, hopefully with a high cloud cover. But I've gone through northern BC on a rainy day where you go into a place, Kynoch Inlet comes to mind. It goes back a ways. And I wrote an article about it for Northwest Yachting Magazine, and I talked about it as just a collection of waterfall after waterfall.
Nice.
And it was waterfalls because it had rained the day before. So it had filled up the streams and streams. You look up to the top of this mountain and here's water coming out of the top and coming down 3,000 feet.
Yeah.
It's just absolutely amazing.
You need to see it in person. That reminds me of Curve of Time. Who's the author again?
M. Wiley Blanchett.
Yeah.
That's right.
One of my favorite books from boating in the Pacific Northwest. Stuff that dreams are made of, and that was over 100 years ago, and just
with her 5 kids,
woman out on her own with her 5 kids,
single mom,
but exploring those places like you're saying, where there's just unbelievable beauty and untouched, and it's just amazing. I love where we live.
And by the way, we talk about the summertime, and I haven't had a chance to do this yet, but I have friends who've done it where they've gone out in winter.
Oh, yeah.
Or even done a Christmas trip
Yep.
on the week between Christmas and New Year's.
Yeah.
And some of these places are drop dead different kind of gorgeous.
Oh yeah.
Different rules.
Yeah, for sure.
You know, you bring your anchor lines, your mooring lines into the head and hang them up in the shower.
Yeah.
So that they don't freeze when they're out there. You do bring a snow shovel.
Yeah.
You do bring crampons if you're worried about getting down an icy dock.
Yeah.
So, but it's just gorgeous.
We can go all year. One of our favorite boating memories is spending Thanksgiving in Fossil Bay.
Yeah.
I mean, it wasn't that far away, but we basically had the whole place to ourselves.
Yeah.
That was beautiful.
Yeah. And there are other people who will tell you about the joys of fall cruising.
Oh yeah.
And then spring cruising and winter cruising. I mean, it's
365 days a year.
Yeah.
Well, now I've always wanted to ask you, because you've gone from Olympia to Alaska a bazillion times. What are your top 3 places?
Oh God, you limited it to 3.
I was going to say top 10, but we don't have, we don't have enough time to record. So
I'll
it's the
give
top 3.
The one that I always say, when I die, I want to go to Roche Harbor Heaven. And so that one's a little trite because people think of Roche Harbor as being very commercialized and bling walking down the dock and things like that. But it's just such a fun atmosphere. And Kevin Carlton, who's harbor master there, he pinches himself every day when he goes to work. And he's just about at retirement age. Kevin, don't shoot me for saying that out loud, but I think
he's retiring early.
Yeah,
wink, wink.
No, he won't retire. He said, even if I'm retired, I'm going to be down at this damn marina every day, hanging out.
I understand.
I might as well get paid for it.
Of course.
So, Roche Harbor would be right up there in the top 3. Lately, a marina that's troubled right now, but Ladysmith. Ladysmith Marina in BC. The local tribe is in the process of kind of taking it back. It's now Oyster Bay. And part of the reason that one is special is because the town is phenomenal. It's got real spirit. We write it up as saying it could be and has been a movie set.
Oh, wow.
Occasionally.
Yeah.
It's just oozing with charm. And it's kind of a shame that the marina, Ladysmith Maritime Marina, is running into some challenges with that, and they'll get it worked out.
Yeah.
But then beyond that, I've, over the years, enjoyed Quatsi Bay up in the Broughtons. Now, Quatsi Bay is no longer open as a marina resort, and I don't know if it ever will be a marina resort again, but there's even a little bay in the back that you can drop anchor. It's easy, and Quatsi Bay in general is like the Yosemite of cruising. Just these rock faces and so forth.
Waterfalls.
That are just gorgeous.
We have a drone shot of Traveler in Quatsi Bay with the stern tie, and it's just that was beautiful.
So that would be that would be my top 3. Now I could name some in Alaska that are fantastic, like Ford's Terror.
That was the first one I
was
was
on
going
your
to
mind?
get. I was going to say, what about?
Yeah, and that one's pretty remote, very remote, about one of the most remote in that trip up there. And you get through that cut, hopefully with the tide correct, and you open up into this bowl that's snow-capped. If you're lucky, there's a bear on the beach down there, and again, pinch yourself.
Have you ever visited any of the glaciers up there?
Oh, yeah, many.
What's that like, going into a bay with a,
Oh, it's majestic. When you see and it has a buildup to it.
Yeah.
For example, I'll talk about my favorite, which is LeConte Glacier outside of Petersburg. And I like it because it's close. You can get to it. You can do a day trip, get there and come back. But as you get out into the strait and you're going towards the glacier, here come the bergy bits. And then they're bigger. Then they're size of a Volkswagen bus.
Concerning? Do you have to maneuver a lot?
No. Good question, though. And even when you get in to go back up to the glacier, I've taken my boat through the glacier ice, and there I'm more concerned, kind of like logs, of getting the ice hitting my prop and causing a problem with that. The way I do it now is we've got a great operator in Petersburg called Seek Alaska, and we pay to have him take us back there in his jet drive boat. And
that's a quick trip there and back.
it is a quick trip, but also he's not going to ruin his
no
prop,
prop,
or anything.
no prop to worry
And
about.
he'll sit there in front of that glacier calving, and
Oh,
you're just pinching yourself again.
Let's go.
And the other thing that I enjoy is when we see a shooter. Now, you got that question.
What's a shooter?
What's a shooter? Funny you should
I've done
ask.
shooters.
Oyster?
Yeah, I've done oyster shooters.
So when a glacier calves from underneath the water,
It pops up, right?
it pops
Yeah.
straight up out
Oh,
of the
I've
water.
never seen that.
Yeah, well, you don't want to be too close to it.
No.
I would. Well, I'm thinking even if you're in that small jet boat, at least you'd be able to get away. But I've seen a few videos of the calving, and boats are like, oh, that's a huge wave coming
Let's
at us
get
right
the
now.
heck out of here. Yeah.
The waves haven't been that bad.
Yeah.
You'd think that with the size of it and the noise,
Yeah.
because it's like a lightning crack when
Yeah.
they break and
Wow.
fall.
Yeah.
Pretty dramatic. But you don't want to get too close because you don't want it dropping on you. Also,
Right.
that's kind of a Darwinian
Yeah,
challenge.
yeah.
And a shooter would be shooting y'all out of the top of the boat. That would be crazy. Yeah, I can't even
Well, so
put it into
that's
words.
That's your top 3, 4, 5, right?
Right.
And, okay, here's
Are you going the opposite end?
Here's the follow-up question.
Uh-oh.
You don't have to answer it, but
don't?
are there
Oh.
places that you just would avoid?
Yeah, there are, and I'd have to think about that a little bit.
We'll just keep it at there are.
Yeah.
There's a few places that you might avoid.
There are a few places where you get there and you go, oh, this doesn't quite feel right.
Yeah.
And but not that many.
Good.
Yeah.
Not that many.
I don't
Good.
hear a lot of negative stories from cruisers up here. Again, I just think the boating community, especially in a haven of boating, is generally a positive crowd. Very supportive.
Mhm.
Absolutely.
It's funny. Before we bought our boat, before I really got into the world of boating, I had a lot of ideas in my head, preconceptions of a lot of like Thurston Howells,
Yes.
and there's just none. I've not met one. I'm sure they exist. But everybody is just so grounded up here
Yeah.
and helpful. If you need something, they're there for you.
Even the
Yeah.
big yacht captains
Even the
or the
big
big
ones.
yacht
Yeah.
owners
Yeah.
are fantastic in that way. And we're joined by this love of boating
Yeah.
and the fact that we get to experience this. And I
We're
think
so
that's
lucky.
what mellows us
Yeah.
out.
Yeah.
And like I said, hopefully helps us to live longer.
Yeah, for sure. So you touched on favorite destinations. Is week long, multi-week long cruising your favorite type of boating? Do you like day boating, weekend boating, any kind of boating, any excuse to get out on the water?
I'd say any kind of boating to be a little too broad.
Yeah.
But I do find that after about 3 weeks on a boat, I get a little bit edgy.
Yeah.
And when I'm out for the summer, I will often fly back from some of these places and deal with things at home or things at work or whatever, and then fly back up.
A little break.
Yeah.
A little break.
Yeah.
A little break. And I'll put in one of my little pet peeves is when I run into people and they go, well, I'm not going to be able to go boating this summer. My daughter's getting married or they're going to have a baby or our grandbaby. And I say, leave the boat somewhere, fly home and then fly back to the boat. But don't write off the whole summer boating because you've got an event like that. You can fit it in.
Yeah.
And luckily we've got trains, planes, and automobiles
Darn right.
that, I do use float planes and wheeled planes, but also on Vancouver Island, I will often rent a car somewhere, drive down to the ferry, come back, and then drive back up and turn in the rental car.
Yeah.
It's not cheap.
Yeah.
But boating is not cheap.
If you have the means and the resources to do it, highly recommended. I agree, because as boaters, we do a lot of talking about going out and boating. It's the actually getting out and boating that, gives us all these experiences and memories. And these years and these boating seasons can go by so quickly.
And they're going by.
They
more
are going
quickly,
by
it seems.
more quickly. And it's
Well, I'm getting up in years and I'm starting to, and I say this to my wife and she hates it when I say it, but I said, I don't know how many more boating summers I have.
Mm-hmm.
And I like to think I still have quite a few.
I'm sure you do.
But thank you.
Mm-hmm.
But it's, I used to get very depressed at the end of the season saying, well,
that might be the last.
Hanging out. Well, no, I don't think of that the last, but one less.
Yeah, one less.
That one goes in the history books.
My attitude would just be boating. I'm going to go until I can't, I've watched a lot of YouTube channels of people getting up there in age that can still boat, and they do. I think it's really, for some of them at least, part of what makes it so that they can remain active.
They keeps them alive.
Well, I mean, no matter what, even whether you're on a sailboat or a powerboat, there's things that you're always doing, activities that keep you moving.
Yep.
And your mind and your heart and your soul, whatever, you keep it active. And
I'll never forget the couple I met in Loreto, Mexico.
Yep.
During Loreto Fest one year, and they were anchored out half a mile.
Yeah.
And every single day he would swim into shore.
Oh my goodness.
She would row behind him, and then he would swim back out. They were in their 80s.
Yep.
And he did this every single day.
Yep. So, Mark, there you go. Well into your 80s, you're going to be
just
boating.
Swimming in the Northwest.
Swimming in the Northwest.
Well, I had somebody on one of our flotillas 2 years ago, a doctor from Port Angeles. You know who you are if you're watching. And he called me and he said, I'm planning on bringing my snorkeling gear. And I also do a guidebook on the Virgin Islands. And I said, I think you have the trip backwards here. He said, no. I use a wetsuit.
Yeah.
And I go snorkeling up in the Northwest. And he said, the visibility is incredible. The sea life is incredible. And he wasn't scuba diving.
Yeah.
He was snorkeling.
Wow.
So there's something to be said for that.
So, I know we have beautiful waters up here. I mean, from talking to divers, I know we have some of the best diving.
The San Juan Islands were in Jacques Cousteau's top 3
Oh, really?
dive locations in the world.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Just due to the
that is saying
abundance
so much
of life to see under the water.
Yeah.
I still don't want to go down there, but I think it's great.
Unfortunately, I'm one of those people that has an intense fear of potentially being on the menu.
We're not going to talk about sharks.
Yeah, we're not going to talk about sharks.
Don't talk about sharks.
No, but I know that it's so beautiful up here, and one of my favorite things is just all the wildlife and the scenery and the beauty. And again, to come back to the Waggoner Guide, it's just such a important part of prepping and preparing and dreaming. The dreams are a big deal. Like, we all need to have our boat dreams, but
goals,
goals. But as Mark pointed out, make sure you do them too.
Yeah.
Don't let those dreams just be a dream.
Well, I want to add one more thing to something we touched on a few moments ago, where we talked about getting older and boating.
Yeah.
And I've talked this season to a couple of people who said, I'm going to take a first mate along. And they didn't mean a babe in a bathing suit.
Right.
They meant, in one case, it was his grandson who's going to have and get paid as a first mate.
And what a great experience for him, too.
Oh, yeah. And you can get somebody that you can pay. Sure. And I recommend that it become a job and not just as a guest on board.
Yeah.
But it's their job to deal with the boat.
Have an able-bodied person that can do things that you might not be able to anymore.
Down there and check the oil and change the oil filters if need be, and get their hands dirty.
Yeah.
And there are plenty of people, typically young, that'll take advantage of that opportunity.
Oh, I agree.
To go cruising. So that's another strategy to making that happen.
Yeah, I mean, as we do get older, our bodies hurt, and certainly the motivation to get up and go boating can decline. But again, it's such a good lifestyle in every way that the longer you can maintain it, and if you just need a little help, a hand to do that, then I totally recommend it. I agree. It's getting you out into nature. It's getting you out into the fresh air and keeping you active. And this is a vital tool, I would say, for making that happen every year.
But this is not the only tool in your arsenal. in your quiver, your
true.
bow, whatever, because Fine Edge Publishing does
Yeah.
quite a few other titles.
Yeah, we do, and the Exploring series by the late Don Douglas and late Rhiann Douglas, is phenomenal. And thanks to Lorena and Leonard Landon, we update it and keep it updated.
Good.
And it has just full of all the anchorages.
Can we, so I don't know anything about any of this, which is great because I'm going to learn right now what this is about. And I'm hoping that we have viewers and listeners that are going to learn. So the publishing company that you purchased 12, 13 years ago was, what was it? Your publishing company?
22 years ago. That's Fine Edge Publishing.
Fine Edge Publishing. Okay.
Yeah.
So there's multiple titles.
Yeah.
It's not just the Waggoner Guide.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
So explain to me.
Well, back
newbie,
then,
what these
they have multiple books. They covered much of the West Coast.
Okay.
And we have the books that cover the Pacific Coast, and then San Juan and Gulf Islands, South Coast of BC, North Coast of BC, and then the only major guidebook that covers Southeast Alaska.
Oh, wow.
It's 500 and something pages. It's a thick. Darren probably has a copy on board. And Don's book, they really went into the detail. He would go in and he would go so far as to carry what we call a lunch hook, a small anchor that you'd normally use for your dinghy.
Yeah.
Well, he'd have it on his boat, and he'd go into an anchorage and start testing the composition of the bottom to figure out how difficult is it going to be for someone to stick an anchor down here. So that kind of detail. And he prided himself of going into places you may not want to go into.
Yeah.
And we kind of say that in the beginning, but I tell people when I talk about the books, they're incredible works, a collection of cruising locations. But you have to read the code almost.
Between the lines almost.
Between the lines that Don will go into places that you don't want to go.
Yeah.
And he had decades of experience.
Decades,
doing
yes.
this, so.
And he modeled himself as the George Vancouver of our era.
Sure.
And
what would make a place a destination you wouldn't want to go? Is it shallow rocks, reefs, or whatever? Is it currents?
Yes,
all
of the above?
All the leftover logging gear on the bottom of the bay.
Okay. Yeah. A little bit of all of that.
Okay.
There's actually very few that are that bad. Leftover logging gear can be a big problem, but a lot of that's been cleaned up or hit
or pulled
by
up on accident.
Yeah. I had a situation in beautiful Deer Harbor right on Orcas Island where I got the hook in and I had a great anchorage for the night, tested it and everything, went to go the next day and I couldn't pull the anchor up. And I tried every technique to dislodge the anchor. Yeah. So I finally called Boat US and Deb, the diver out of Friday Harbor, she came out, threw on her dive gear and went down and she said,
Sure enough.
And she said, "You're not going to believe this. Your hook is wrapped around a cable that's about 2 inches thick."
Wow.
And it was a barge cable that was down there, had been down there for a long time. And I happened to be the lucky one to find it.
Yeah.
I went to Mark Broman, the harbor master there, and I said, "Mark, you didn't tell me there was a cable down there."
I found your cable.
You're the first one to ever find it. Now, don't you hate that when you're the first one?
You would think with dragging an anchor that would be discovered quickly, right? A cable that is going to get caught up on. That's amazing. How deep was the water when that happened?
It was only about 75 feet.
Yeah. And she dove 75 feet.
Yeah.
Man, there's some brave souls up here.
And she pulled the anchor out, and I saved, I don't know how many hundreds of dollars for my anchor gear.
Good.
And granted, I had to pay Boat US for that, but it was worth it.
So worth it. If you're out here boating, get Boat US.
Absolutely, and they do a great job.
Yeah.
And not only that, but they know where the trouble spots are.
Yeah.
You're usually not the first one.
But you were.
I was. She had never heard of it. The harbor master there had never heard of it.
Somebody had to discover it.
And as far as I know, and I ask Mark Broman every time I see him, did anybody else find that cable? No, Mark, you have the prize. You were the lucky guy.
I would imagine they'd have to cut the cable or something. I don't know how you remedy that.
At that, I mean, the weight of that.
That was it.
You just leave it there.
I couldn't lift it.
Yeah.
And I tried. And
amazing.
yeah.
So another series of books that Fine Edge has, which I've always been a big fan of because of Lawrence's artwork.
Yes.
Is
Dream
the
Speaker.
Dream Speaker
You bet.
series. Are they still producing?
Well, they're occasionally updating.
Okay, good.
And doing updates to it, which is all welcome. Usually we do that in between printings of a new edition. So they are out there.
Great.
And we work to keep them up to date also. But these books are characterized by, as Darren said, Lawrence's artwork, which is absolutely gorgeous watercolors.
Yeah. He'll paint
Like illustrate, like a person that does illustrations
Exactly,
or something of
yeah.
Yes. Now the key is they'll put their own boat in each one of those illustrations. And that's the hidden code to basically say, this is the best spot to anchor. Either the best spot for a breeze, or the best view, or the best sunset.
Yeah.
And
so what is the name of this series?
Dream Speaker.
Dream Speaker.
There's a big difference between Waggoner and like the Dream Speaker is they don't cover every single place. The Waggoner Guide covers every place.
Yeah.
The Dream Speaker series, they picked their favorites.
They're specials,
and that's why they're so wonderful.
Wow.
I'll get you a copy you can thumb through in front of the fire. It's they're wonderful to read.
I can't get enough of the boating books, especially that have to do with the Pacific Northwest. There's not enough content out there for the Pacific Northwest. I feel like it deserves way more. You know, a video.
Won't find another area of the world, and I've looked at all of them, that have been covered as well as the different series of guidebooks that are available up here.
Sure, but what does get covered all the time, I feel overly covered, is like, the Caribbean, or, I feel like there's certain, for obvious reasons, places that boaters go all the time, and I just get tired, I get tired of the same content all the time, the same crystal clear
like if you're looking
waters.
At YouTube channels,
I want to see more boaters up here in this paradise, and so finding any more content like that, the series.
It's funny when we first started doing our video cruising guides for Pacific Northwest boater. This is back in 2012 or so. We literally had people say, "No, don't show that on video. That's our secret place. Now everybody's going to know about it." And I said, there's already 4 guidebooks that cover that place in detail because I showed
I've been accused of that, or people would walk up and go, "Oh, God, I would love to tell you about this place, but then you'll tell everybody and you'll ruin it." Yeah. And there are a few places, don't ask me for them because I can't think of them at the moment, but there are a few places that you go, boy, I don't know if I want to, I've
always wondered that if there's little secret locations only known to the locals.
Yeah. There are, and there's one that comes to mind whenever this comes up with down in the Virgin Islands called, because I know you've cruised a bit down there, called Bubbling Pool.
Oh, I've not even heard of it.
And it's a natural whirlpool where the waves come in and set up their own current when they come in and go into a curve in the rocks, and it's like a jacuzzi.
Yeah.
And so the locals, when they told me about it, they said, "No, you can't write about it."
Yeah.
And then, as Darren was saying, I found out everybody was writing about it
they
except
already
me.
Knew.
Sure.
Yeah.
And but there are a few up here that are pretty extra special. But we have as many as we can in the Waggoner Guide, and I'm at a pain to tell you any of the secret ones that I don't remember at the moment.
We've known each other. We were just talking before the show. We've known each other 16, 17 years.
Yeah.
And we've always, Mark and I and Lisa, we've always lived about 20, 25 miles apart.
Yeah.
But we would never see each other here at home. We would always run into each other at the Miami boat or the Annapolis boat show, Oakland.
Yeah.
My favorite time was we were on a Latitudes and Attitudes Share the Sail flotilla in the British Virgin Islands, and we're by the pool and walk up and there's Mark. we're like, what are you doing here? What is that? So
I was out of context.
Yeah.
In a bathing suit.
Absolutely out of context.
Yeah.
But you know, it's a small world, and then the boating world is even a smaller world. That's amazing. You guys have been everywhere. I feel like I have a lot of catching up to do.
Well, we've been everywhere, but just like Mark just said, though, wherever we would go, Mark probably experienced this too. You'd go somewhere and people go, "Isn't this just beautiful here? Where do you live?" In Pacific Northwest, and they're like, "Oh,
yeah,
you're used to that."
Yeah.
So
I already know.
we're so lucky.
Yeah, I already know how lucky we are, and of course, I want to be reminded constantly, for sure. But yeah, we do live in a beautiful place, and Mark, thank you and your team for making this beautiful place more accessible.
Thank you.
Making our trips more fun, giving us dreams and hopes. You know, all those places you mentioned, your favorite, I have not been, but I'm going to. You know,
well, those ones I mentioned are easy.
Yeah.
LeConte Glacier is maybe a little more challenging, but yeah, we'll catch up.
Maybe by the time I get to Alaska, I'll have a little bit more.
But
skill.
as you're going,
Yeah.
though, there's one more title that Mark has that every boater needs to have.
I love this. I need more
Okay.
books. Tell me.
Now I'm curious.
Ports and Passes.
Oh yeah. Our
And
Tide and Current guide.
the Current Atlas.
Yeah.
So talk just a little bit about that, because that's very important to have.
Well, Ports and Passes is our tide guide produced out of our Canadian office, and it has everything in terms of the tides and currents, including how to read them. And a lot of people don't understand tides and currents, and I recommend everybody watching this show, please learn. It's more important to successful Northwest boating than you may realize.
Yeah.
And so we put that out every year, and it's very popular. We're challenged right now with it in that it's a very expensive book to print. And it's getting to the point where it's tough to afford the printing. Now, when I say that, we really should be charging about $75 a copy. And that's a lot. And then I get the comment, well, I get it for free on my chart plotter or an app I have on my iPhone. And I have to point out, but those companies are not every year buying the data from the Canadian government.
Right.
The Canadian government sells us the data. They believe that data is the property of the Crown. NOAA on the U.S. says that tide and current data, you paid for it once already in your taxes. So you don't have to pay for it twice. So we get that and we can put that in. But we spend about $8,000-$10,000 a year with the Canadian government to get that data. And my proof of the pudding, and I'll give anybody their money back if they're not happy with the quality of the data, is that if you look up, I'll pick on Navionics, which is a great program, but if you use it for tides and currents, it's off by 45 minutes to an hour.
Wow.
And that's because they're using old formulas that are free. And so up in Canada, the data can be off by 45 minutes.
And that could make all the difference if you're
it
not
could
on
make
time.
for a very exciting day.
Yeah.
Or an expensive day.
Yeah, that's true.
Very expensive day.
A lesson learned, certainly.
Yeah.
And one thing I have seen consistently with all of our guests, and we're talking some legendary sailors, when they talk about the difference in the Pacific Northwest, they're always talking about tides and currents.
Yes.
That is a significant factor.
Yes.
And if you're talking about legendary sailors who know what they're doing and it concerns them, or it's important to them, then it certainly should be important to all of us.
Yeah, I get these phone calls from yacht captains who've cruised all over the world, and they say, I'm coming to the Northwest. What do I need? And I start to tell them, and I used to tell them about the 65 charts you needed to go to Alaska. And they'd go, really? I need to have that many? I said, yeah, you do.
Yeah.
You do. And anyway, I'm embarrassed to say how many professional captains have come up here without charts.
Yeah.
And I go, ooh, or not knowing. One funny side story is 2 years ago, I guess 3 years ago, Gene Gusev and was captain of the Sail Like a Girl on Race to Alaska. So after she had won the Race to Alaska, I said, Gene, how did you do it with the tides and currents? She said, we just went. We just went for it.
Ignored it. Yep.
So I said, would you like me to take you through and give you a briefing of how to do it, this and that? So they had won that the year before.
Yeah.
I did the briefing. They got fourth.
Wow.
So now Gene says there were other reasons
Sure.
they
Yeah,
got fourth,
yeah.
but it's kind of a
Yeah.
humorous thing back and forth. But there are many people on that race to Alaska who just go for
Point
it.
in the direction and go.
And one
Keep
crew
their fingers crossed.
who shall remain nameless, they said, yeah, we got into a whirlpool, spun around about twice before we could get out of it, and then kept going. He said it was scary.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I can't even imagine. Yeah, we had Jean here.
Yeah.
She was in the studio recently.
When
Gene's
when we had
fantastic.
Kirsten on.
Kirsten, yep.
Yes.
So in that show, we were dreaming of the dream team for
The dream
race
team
to
of
We'd
Race
have
to Alaska.
Kirsten, Gene, and
Yeah.
then we had Bruce Schwab.
Oh God.
And
the
Matt
three
Steverson.
of them, and then Matt
Matt
Steverson's
Steverson, who
got his
also won the
boat.
first race.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's right.
Yeah.
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 Well, this has been just a wonderful conversation, Mark. Thank
It's my
you.
favorite topic.
Yeah.
I know, right? All of us. That's why we're here.
Yeah. You can tell how excited we get about it.
Yeah.
I know. Well, that's because we are all truly
Boat
boat geeks.
geeks.
I'm just glad we had this time to sit down and talk with you. I've been super familiar with the guide for multiple years, dreaming and hoping and wishing and planning, and those trips are going to happen for me. But thank you so much for sharing everything that goes into this. Congratulations on the 30th year anniversary.
Thank you.
If you have taken a few years off from buying one, you want to buy these pretty regularly. I would definitely recommend the 30th anniversary copy. And again, just flipping through the page, it makes me want to stop the podcast and just start reading right now. But just so much wonderful information, and you and your team are doing a wonderful job.
Thanks.
Thank you for all the hard work over all the years, and making all of our cruising more enjoyable in the Pacific Northwest.
You can pick up a copy at wagnerguide.com,
That's right.
or even here in the Port Ludlow Marina.
In the
they
marina.
stock
Right.
in the marina store. So you've got bookstores, chandleries, marinas. There's all sorts of places to find.
You know what I
the
want to
Wagner
do?
Guide.
So we did borrow this copy from the store here, the marina. But
No,
what I think
you shoplifted it.
we shoplifted it with their knowledge. But I think what we're going to do is we're going to give it away. So stay tuned to our channel.
That's a great idea.
Yeah, and if anybody out there has not experienced the treasure that is the Waggoner Guide, please stay tuned for some information on how you can win this brand new copy of the 30th anniversary Waggoner Guide. You will love it, I guarantee it. So, Mark, thank you for being here. A total
Thank
honor
you.
to
Have
have
me
you in our
back
studio.
again. I
We will.
obviously love to talk
All
about
right.
this and love to chat with you guys. I mean, this is fun.
We'll have you here for the 31st anniversary.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, that's all right. You don't have to wait that long.
All right. Well, this has been another episode of the Boat Geeks. We hope you had a good time. And this is Darren signing out.
We will see you next time.
And thank you, Mark.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Want to win the 30th anniversary edition of the Wagner Guide used in the show? Simply leave a comment telling us what your favorite Pacific Northwest destination is and why. The Geeks will choose their favorite entry as the winner. Leave a comment, win a Wagner, the 30th anniversary edition of the Wagner Guide. Compliments of the Boat Geeks.